offering respects to Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Okay, I'm very delighted to be able to join you all this evening, and in particular for Wang Mo inviting me and being able to join this assembly of the Fourfold Sangha, bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, upasakas, upasikas, monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen, and that's the traditional assembly of the Buddhas, and the legacy that the Buddha has given us is, say, passed on through us. It isn't anybody else going to do it for us. So that, and to make the effort to organize this gathering, I'm both greatly appreciative and in awe, actually, that it's all come together. I'm a forest monk. I like living in the countryside, and I try to keep things as small as possible, and probably just too lazy to organize anything like this. So it's very appreciative that the Institute here has put forth the effort and has the faith to pull it all together. It's not a small thing, and really something worthy of delight. I also appreciate Wang Mo's giving me a Dhamma topic, because oftentimes people invite me to give a talk, and then they'll ask me, "What are you talking about?" So, I don't know, I have no idea. Especially my teacher, Ajahn Chah, the way he would train us is, when you give Dhamma teaching, you get up in front of whoever is listening, make your mind peaceful, recollect the blessings of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and you see what comes out. And so then, which works well in some occasions, but when you're making posters for events, it doesn't quite work the same way. Although I do remember one time, I was still living in Thailand, and the abbot of Wat Pah Pong, Ajahn Chah's successor, was asked to give a talk at a public venue in Bangkok, and I know the person who organized it, and I know they asked for a topic, and I don't know how to get a decent translation of it, but it's sort of in Thai, for the Thai people, when he was asked what what he was going to talk about, and then that was actually put up on the poster, but it was damn me, damn Kurt, so which means kind of, whatever. And, something will come up. So that was what was put on the poster. I think in America it doesn't quite work that way. But this topic of merit and the awakening mind, and of course how it fits into the path, Four Noble Truths. I should be able to fill in the time and be able to come up with something. The first thing that comes to mind is a discourse that the Buddha gives, a very short one, and he talks. It is very short, and the Buddha acknowledges the reality that there is this suffering, there is this kind of discontent, dissatisfaction that people experience, and there's but then he says there's two results that come from that experience of suffering, and one is bewilderment, and the other is a search, and sort of a search for a way out, or a search for something better, what to do with it. Maybe there's some way out of this. So that sense of if we're trapped in bewilderment and confusion and our delusions, and it's hard to do much. But when we acknowledge that suffering and dis-ease, that's so much a part of the human condition, and you pay attention to that. Say, how can I deal with this? What to do? What to work with? That search for a way out, or a way to alleviate it, a way to change that suffering into something that is either meaningful or useful or beneficial in some way. And I think that's where this concept of merit is really helpful, in the sense that the reality is we can't. It isn't that we all of a sudden realize, oh, I suffer. And then, as a nice idea, we decide to not suffer, and it doesn't quite work that way. We keep, butting our heads against the wall and trying to figure out some way of alleviating, of practicing, of living our life. But all along that way of trying to figure it out, what is it that supports our search? And I think that's where this concept of merit is really helpful. The word merit is actually terrible as a word. I mean, it sounds like sort of Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, and you get your merit badge, and which isn't so. It's not quite what we're doing, and it so often Thai people in particular come to the monastery, or I meet them in different places. They're living in the West, and the word that's usually used in as merit in Thai is bun, and it comes from the Pali punya. That word punya, and when Thai language, you always try to get things down to one syllable, so that shorten things, drop the syllable. So bun, and they're always Thai people are always asking, how do you translate bun? I'm trying to tell my friends about Buddhism, and I'm trying to teach my kids about Buddhism, and I'm trying to teach them about Bun. And how do you translate it into English? And it really doesn't, it translates difficult, and it's difficult to translate because it has so many, it's such a rich area of experience. So this word punya, I think it's really helpful to get a feel for what it actually is. And I think this is one of the words that I would lobby to not try to translate. If we can get this into the English language, that'd be great, just punya. Because it is really, to me, it's really nuanced. And there's another beautiful little discourse where the Buddha actually says to the effect of, do not be afraid of punya. Punya is another word for happiness and well-being, and this is so these are this punya is a way that we can experience a sense of happiness and inner well-being, and not to be afraid of it, because sometimes there is a certain a tendency in the West to sort of think of what's the goal, what's the highest knowledge, and how do I get there as quick as possible, and then end up sort of skipping over a lot of the actual fundamentals without thinking that it's okay. I'm not going to don't have to bother to mess with that. I'm just going to go for the wisdom bit and liberate my heart from all entanglements and be enlightened. Nice idea. But I don't see it working very well unless those foundations are really well laid. And it's just in terms of the ways that the way the mind works is that it really does rely on happiness, even though, say, the Buddha takes the Four Noble Truths as the kind of the essence of the teaching and the goal of the practice, that we understand suffering, we really understand what those causes of suffering are, what the cessation of suffering is, what the path leading to cessation of suffering is. When we think, it's easy to get the impression that, it's all about suffering. But that's on the level of view or perspective, or how we hold experience. But it's helpful to reflect that that path leading, the whole essence of the path leading to the cessation of suffering, whether it's, say, right view, right intention, through right speech, right action, the aspects of livelihood, of effort, of mindfulness, of concentration, all of those elements, each aspect of the path is actually conducive to the arising of happiness and well-being, so that the whole path is supported by the establishing of happiness and well-being, and it's difficult to penetrate and relinquish without this support of well-being. And there's because and of course we've been doing the recitations, and this was an oral tradition. At the time of the Buddha, it was passed on orally, it was memorized, and one of the kind of features of a oral tradition passed on to memory is that there is a lot of repetition. There are stock phrases that crop up all sorts of places, and so that there's a sequence of causal conditions that the Buddha uses, and it has different starting points. Sometimes it comes from sila, from virtue. Sometimes from just the actual experience of suffering, arising of faith. Sometimes from wise reflection, the yoniso manasikara, the wise attention. But then it transitions into kind of stock phrases, and there's the arising of, with these different starting points, then it transitions into this stock phrase with this as a cause and then a condition. There's the arising of delight and pamoja. There's this arising of delight, and then with this delight as a condition, there is the arising of joy, as a piti, and with the joy as a condition, as a cause and condition, there's the arising of tranquility and passaddhi. So tranquility and ease, and then with this tranquility as a cause and condition, there's the arising of sukha. In this sense, it's real a mental, physical happiness, bliss even, and then with this happiness as a condition, cause and condition, there's the arising of samadhi, of concentration. And oftentimes the Buddha will stop. In many of the discourses, the Buddha actually stops and makes the point that the happy mind is easily concentrated. And I can remember reading that discourse, and I probably read it before, but it didn't click. I've been a monk for many years, and then it was this sort of have this kind of insight or realization, kind of duh. I've been working it backwards. And I'm sure most of us do the same, because it's sort of like, most of us, we practice Dhamma, we practice meditation, and sort of, and when I get my samadhi together, when I get my concentration together, I'll be happy. And that's actually not what the Buddha says at all. He says, get your happiness together, and your meditation is going to fall into place. That's the way it works. That's the way the human mind works that way. And then with that causal condition goes on and further refined. But it's just that with that samadhi as condition, concentration as causal condition, there's a rising of knowledge and vision of the way things truly are. So that seeing clearly is dependent on that happiness, that well-being. And so then, tie that back to punya, with the Buddha, saying punya, this is another word for happiness. It's another, and to realize, okay, this is really a part of the path. This is not some frivolous pursuit. And of course, happiness is different. There's obviously happiness that the Buddha says is, to avoid, in the sense of if it's grounded in sensual gratification and obsession and attachment, okay, that's not going to work. But there's so many avenues of happiness that are fair game and totally within the bounds of the Buddha's teachings. We don't. The whole point of the practice is not to make yourself increasingly miserable and kind of dourly looking at the world as just an awful calamity that all I have to do, if I could just make myself miserable enough and get out of this. It's not quite how it works. You have to learn how to actually have this hold the quality of happiness and well-being that sustains. And I think that's another aspect that when the Buddha talks about, how do we gauge whether our practice is progressing or whether it's not progressing, or are we getting hooked by things that are obstructive? And it's it's actually quite straightforward, in the sense that when wholesome dhammas increase and unwholesome dhammas decrease, it's working. And the opposite, of course, is true, in the sense that, okay, we're starting to go down a path of diminishing returns when unwholesome dhammas increase and wholesome dhammas decrease. So that you're paying attention to the kusala dhammas, akusala dhammas, and the whole spectrum of the kusala and akusala is both on a cognitive level, on an emotional level, on a kind of a mind stream, psychological level. There's different layers of the kusala and akusala. It's worth really paying attention, investigating. How to support those wholesome dhammas so that they increase, and to recognize the unwholesome dhammas so that there can be a relinquishment or a protection from them. Punya. Back to punya. These are the tools of increasing the wholesome dhammas and bringing the unwholesome dhammas to decrease. In the suttas, the Buddha points to three basic means of actions leading to supporting punya, punya kiriyavatu, and those are dana, giving, generosity, sila, virtue, moral integrity, bhavana, the cultivation, development of a training. The commentarial literature expands that a bit, and it's actually quite useful. That expansion to 10 bases of wholesome action, and wholesome action leading to punya, supporting punya. And of course, it starts with that dana, sila, bhavana, and but then it goes to the aspects of humility and reverence, and is the fourth one, and that's really again helpful. If we think of what is the kind of the core glue that holds the experience of suffering together. So much of it comes down to the sense of the self position, the I position, the me position, this mine. When everything revolves around that experience and that holding of that I, me and mine position, then that's the glue that holds that experience of suffering together. I can't remember what stimulated it. So it's funny how the mind works, because memories come up that you think, wow, I haven't thought of that for a long time. But there's an old Beatles song, that I, me, mine. And, sort of all through the day, I, me, mine, I, me, mine, I, me, mine. So right, you think that's exactly it. This is where our that experience of that I, me, mine is such a tenacious, has such a tenacious hold on the mind. And humility and reverence is a way of shifting that position from that self orientation to something that is more beautiful. Coming into a hall like this, we're just surrounded by things that are worthy of reverence, and to set aside that sense of critical self-position and approach it with humility. The whole, everything. I mean, this is one of the things I love about the Tibetan tradition, is the richness of the iconography, the artwork, the reverence that is shown to Buddha Dhamma Sangha, to the lineage, to the teachers. So it's really wonderful. I remember one time myself and my assistant abbot at the time, I was still living in Thailand, and I think it was about 1992, and I went to Bhutan, and that was really my first experience with the Vajrayana tradition, and we were received by the. I was a guest of the government. So I had taken to different places and looked after very well, and because you get introduced to teachers and taken to into the different holy places, and we'd been there for a few days. And it was, coming from a forest monastery in the northeast of Thailand. It's actually quite austere, which has its. I love it, but it has a different flavor. My assistant abbot sort of leans over to me and kind of whispers, "I feel like a Presbyterian in the Vatican." He loved it as well, but it was sort of like, this is different. But it has a function, and I think it's important that we, what are the objects of reverence, and how do we establish a humility? And of course, each of the Buddhist cultures has ways of manifesting that, and of course it's something that is a basis of delight and happiness, and it's this punya. One of the fifth way of as an avenue of generating punya is giving service, and to be able to be of service to others, to help others, to be ready to tune into what is actually useful to be of service, and I think this is say within traditional Buddhist cultures. There's so many ways that giving of service is exemplified and modeled, and I think as Westerners, certainly speaking for myself, first going to live in a monastery, just really unfamiliar with that area, and having to learn it, but by learning how to be attentive and see what are the ways that I can be of service, what can I help with, and certainly in, say, like in a monastic form, you begin by training in how to look after. How do you look after your teachers? How do you look after your elders within a community? And that's a really beautiful way of learning how to implement that. think one of the my own teacher, Ajahn Chah, he was a exceptional teacher, very charismatic, and but he had obstacles in terms of his his long life. He had terrible health, so that the last 10 years of his life was bedridden, unable to speak, unable to help himself. And one of the, and you think, well, that's awful. And at a certain level it was, but also one of the things that it did was give that whole period of time the community of monastics, the nuns, the lay people, an opportunity to really be of service to him. And it was really, and it was so necessary, and you had to work together to do it. And I think particularly, I'm speaking for myself as a monk, it really brought our community together. Ajahn Chah had a lot of branch monasteries. He was able to instill faith in a lot of people. He was very skilled at training people, so that he had a large community around him. But when he first began, when he first was ill and unable to help himself, probably there was maybe 80 to 100 branch monasteries already, 1,000 monks. And but everybody had to come together and taking turns and really being of service. And it drew out something really beautiful in the community. And it was extended over a period. Every 2 weeks it would change. I mean, there would be monks who were skilled as the taking on responsibility. They understood the continuity of his care. But then you could have, there was usually about 4 monks and a novice in the daytime, 4 monks and a novice in the nighttime. And so that so many people got the opportunity to really be of service and to looking after. I mean, it's hard enough looking after our own bodies when they're healthy, but looking after an aged, sick body, it's a lot of work. And to be able to give oneself to that, to be of service, it's a real blessing. So that's sort of an extreme example. There's all sorts of little things that we can always be paying attention to of being of service, and it has that effect of how do we step out of the way, and how do we drop that whole I, me, and mine agenda and pay attention to what's actually needed, what's useful, what's beneficial, what's in accordance with Dhamma, what's in accordance with truth. And of course that allows the mind to really brighten. And so that punya, that's the basis of punya. Another, say, in the list of the ways of creating punya is the sharing of punya, dedication of punya. So that recognition that one has actually done something good, one's done something wholesome, and to be able to acknowledge that. Because so often we, especially I think in our culture, it's incredibly competitive. American culture is incredibly competitive. So we tend to go to the critical assessment. We tend to go to the negative. We tend to go to not good enough. And to actually be able to do something that is good and to recognize it, acknowledge it. And not only to acknowledge it within oneself, but then to have that heart that wants to share and wants to, well, may this be a benefit to others. May this be a benefit to so-and-so. May it be a benefit to Venerable Tartang Tuku. These are there's a very, again, you start seeing so much of this, the actions of punya are directly giving us the opportunity to release and relinquish that I, me, mine position. And that's where we're actually able to start to experience a cessation of dukkha. Because it's that constant refrain that goes on in our mind that keeps us suffering. It's not as if we're being tortured by anything around us, or we're experiencing some kind of a catastrophic experience. As so much of the experience of dis-ease, discontent, dissatisfaction, stress is just this internal misapprehension of truth, of reality, and how to hold it. It's that holding of it skillfully that's so important, and it's like the teachings of the Buddha aren't so distant from us that we can't experience the teaching and the fruits of those teachings. It's a here and now Dhamma that the Buddha was teaching. So it's experienceable here and now. What comes to mind is a time when Ajahn Chah, it was the very first time that Ajahn Chah went to England, and he was teaching at the Buddhist group had a city center, and it was on a main thoroughfare, and across the road was a pub, and the weather was just getting warm enough that you could open the windows. So then you have the evening meditation, Friday night, Saturday night, or whatever, and Dhamma talk, and it's you got the sound of the traffic, the sound of the pub across the way, and they had the evening sit, meditation, had the Dhamma talk, and opened it up for questions. And the first question, what do you do when sounds come and disturb you? And Ajahn Chah said, sounds don't come and disturb you. You go out and disturb the sounds. The sound's just doing what sound's doing. get upset at it. And that's the story of our suffering. And it isn't as if there's some external force got it in for us. It's that lack of understanding of the true nature of things that we misapprehend, misunderstand, and we create suffering. So that being able to, and again, I think this is where punya, you start recognizing, I've got all these opportunities for generating punya, and there's so many things I can be doing to be establishing punya, this sense of wholesome mental states, a basis of well-being. So that sharing of merit. Also, say in the list that is given is the delighting in the merit that other people made. So that anumodana, so delighting in the goodness of others. And again, I mean, if you start from a competitive point of view, and you're comparing who's good, who's not good, am I as good as them, are they better than me, am I better than them, just spinning around it, the thing is suffering. Or somebody else does something good, and then it's sort of a reflection, I didn't do it good enough or something. There's this, the contortions that the mind goes through to make ourselves miserable. Seeing goodness being generated, goodness being done, and then to delight in that. It's the heart is, we've got, again, it's sort of just, we've kind of, if we take the opportunity for happiness and well-being, freedom from suffering, if we take it out of our own, individual responsibility, and then recognize that, well, actually, we can delight in the goodness that other people do. We've just sort of upped our chances of well-being. If it's just only dependent on ourselves, and it's just me trying to make myself feel okay, but then when you realize, there's a whole world around me that you can focus in on what other people are doing, and to delight in that, to anumodana, this sense of delighting in the goodness that others do. And you see, the heart has such an opportunity to brighten and to experience happiness. So that the next one in the list is the listening to Dhamma, listening to teachings, and of course people have gathered here. That's what we're doing. You say, wow, yeah, it's a great opportunity, and so that having that opportunity to listen to Dhamma, listen to the Buddha's teachings, it doesn't even, you don't have to even understand it sometimes. Because one of the things that comes to mind is right now is, I can't remember how many years ago it was, maybe it was 5 or 6 years ago, His Holiness was teaching in San Francisco, and And of course it was a big event, and he was teaching on dependent origination, pretty detailed. And I invited my mother down to be at the monastery and visit, and then take her to His Holiness the Dalai Lama's teachings. And I was about halfway through the second day, and my mother, who's really not a faith type, she said, "I don't understand this, and there's too much information. I can't process it." I said, "That's fine. You don't need to understand it. Just pay attention to the feeling of it. Just pay attention to the visuals of the hall, His Holiness, the people around, the audience. Pay attention to the feeling." And you're listening to Dhamma, so it doesn't, necessarily, sometimes it's good to, have it all figured out on a rational level, but sometimes it's not about the rational level at all. Sometimes it's about how do we hold it? How does it affect the heart? And so that's when we listen to Dhamma, we can be paying attention to how does it affect us on many different levels, and that rather than just trying to keep it intellectually cogent, but how do we feel about it? How's it affecting us? How's that? And that's actually Ajahn Chah. I remember him teaching one time, especially to us as Westerners, because say going and training with Ajahn Chah, you go and live there and you listen to his teachings, and but you don't know the language. So, and of course you put it, and then you go and get the books where you're learning Thai grammar and Thai vocabulary and trying to get it all down. And especially in the early days when I first got there, he didn't even talk Thai. He didn't speak Thai. He spoke in the Lao dialect. And so it was, you had to learn that as well. And there's no books that teach you the Lao dialect. It's a local dialect. So you have to really just pick it up. And we're going to Ajahn Chah, what do we do? We're trying to understand you. We don't understand. He said, you don't have to understand everything. Just be patient, sit and relax, let it wash over you. It'll sink in over time. Then again, it's an impulse. I got to get it now. But much of the listening to Dhamma is just opening oneself to Dhamma. How do I open myself to Dhamma? How do I be ready to hear the Dhamma? So I gotta say, okay, I get my plug in for punya again. This is establishing that base of punya, and you realize, okay, that because some of the things we really learn from sometimes aren't necessarily just the words themselves. So that as listening to Dhamma is also listening to, being able to tune into what is the demeanor, the conduct of somebody who is steeped in Dhamma. That's what I certainly saw that with, say, with my own teacher, Ajahn Chah, and many of his senior teachers. Oftentimes it wasn't the kind of explanation that was important, but it was the example and the modeling, and that, and that's a listening as well, listening to the Dhamma in that way, and there's a delight that comes from that. Another way of I would say again, the avenues of generating punya is the giving of Dhamma, either teaching of Dhamma or and there's so many ways of doing the supporting of Dhamma publications, but also I think being a kalyana mitta, a good spiritual friend to others, so that's a giving of Dhamma. It's a Dhamma dana, and so that the giving of being a good spiritual friend to others, being as good a model or example as one can without torturing oneself too much. But that, rising up to the occasion of living the Dhamma and recognizing that has benefits that others are able to feel, to experience, to see. And that's a basis of punya. It's very wholesome. So that there's so many ways of being able to generate that. The aspects of the last avenue of the generating of punya is the I think it's a nice way of putting it, straightening out one's views. So that straightening out one's views and aligning one's views with right view, aligning one's views, one's perspectives of how do we hold and perceive the world around us, how do we perceive the sense of self, and aligning that with Dhamma, and aligning it with right view. And really fundamentally, say the basis of right view, especially on an ordinary level, the mundane level, is really around the recognition of the just the law of karma. There are actions, and there's the fruits of actions. There's the actions that are wholesome and good and beautiful, and there's the results. There's good results from that. There's actions that are unskillful, unwholesome, and they don't have such a great result. There are beings that have purified themselves. There are beings that have, and there are other realms of existence. The fruits of actions carry on. It's not we don't live in a kind of a materialistic, deterministic existence. We're actually beings that carry with us our spiritual legacy. So then, taking responsibility for that, and so that's an incredible punya. When you really take responsibility for yourself and recognize that our actions affect ourselves, our actions affect others. We don't live in isolation. we're always affecting each other. So that sense of really paying attention and taking responsibility. And that when we establish ourselves in that basis of right view, then we've got a certain clarity of making skillful choice, and that it always feels better to experience happiness than it is to suffer. It's very simple. it's and that's where the sense of paying attention to feeling is so important. I remember one time Ajahn Chah being asked by somebody who came to visit, a Thai person. Of course, he was always being asked this question, and he'd get different answers at different times. But it was, you've got these, all these Western disciples, and you don't speak English, they don't speak Thai. How do you teach them? And how can you possibly teach them? And Ajahn Chah would usually have a glass of warm water beside himself, and he said, well, it's like this glass of warm water. In English it's warm water, in Thai it's nam ron, in Lao it's nam hon, in Indian language it'd be something different, in Chinese it'd be something different, in French it'd be something different, in German it'd be something different. The language doesn't make it clear at all what it is. He said, and so that language isn't really a reliable basis for teaching Dhamma. He said, but it's not about the language. He said, if you just stick your finger in, he said, then you'll know what warm water is. He said because the language of Dhamma is not a spoken language, it's a language of feeling. It's what we feel, what we experience. And it's all about, and so the feeling, of course, is cessation of suffering, ending of suffering, the overcoming of suffering. So that paying attention to that feeling, what is it that increases suffering? What is it that increases happiness and well-being, brings that dis-ease, discontent to cessation, brings it to an end. And of course that's the basis of the talk this evening, is what are the tools that we have for supporting our practice? What are the bases of support that we have for supporting our practice? And it's not all about the intricacies of a meditation technique. It's about how we live, and the first aspects that are really big, actually, that I just kind of skipped over them: dana, generosity, sila, virtue, bhavana, cultivation. I kind of skipped over those. So it's not around kind of the nuances of technique or methodology, is what are the ways that, how do we be generous and giving and ready to share, and realizing that we can delight in that sharing? How do we use the aspects of say like a code of moral discipline in a way that allows us to experience happiness and well-being? Because it's not, from a Buddhist perspective, it's not, these are not commandments. They're not the moral injunction. It's like there's a very beautiful sutta where the Buddha, speaking about the 5 moral precepts, the 5 basic precepts, and they're really all of the moral trainings are built on. But the Buddha speaks of there are these 5 great gifts. And so what are the 5 great gifts? Okay, refraining from taking life, refraining from taking what's not given, refraining from sexual misconduct. Going through the 5 precepts and saying, these are the 5 great gifts. And why are they these great gifts? Because they're a gift that give safety, freedom from oppression, give a sense of security, trust. And it's an incredible gift. And you see, so those are something to really delight in. We're living rather than it being some kind of onerous kind of moral training that one's trying to force oneself into. It's sort of being delighting in this goodness that one is establishing oneself in, and then living with that kind of integrity and creating trust and clarity in one's actions and speech. It's a real different way of holding it. Bhavana, in terms of, so often that people are just, trying to get the right technique, trying to get the right, if I only got the right, meditation method, then my mind would finally become quiet and I'd become peaceful and I'd experience meditative bliss. But as I mentioned before, in the sense of how do we establish the basis of happiness and well-being and allow the mind to settle? That's an important shift. And then also, in terms of, say, the mental cultivation, bhavana, meditation, paying attention to what actually works. One of Ajahn Chah's teachers, I remember Ajahn Chah telling us, saying that him giving meditation in instruction and what kind of, how to deal with the meditation. He was sort of, it's kind of easy, if the defilements come at you high, then you duck. And if they come at you low, then you jump over them. So just pay attention. See what the kind of the obscurities and defilements, attachments, what are they? What are they coming? You find a way around them. And that's what one's doing. Because that's mindfulness and attentiveness, reflective investigation, and taking on the challenge of training the heart, and kind of delighting in it. So and that's where that basis of punya, of course, is important. You start learning how to delight in those aspects of moral training, of mental training, of living a life aligned with Dhamma. There's a phrase that the Buddha uses as a one of the qualities that's essential for the mind to enter the stream of Dhamma, to experience the first fruit of awakening and stream entry. And in Pali, Dhammano Dhamma Patipatana, practicing Dhamma in accordance with Dhamma. So just how do we keep reflecting on, am I practicing according to my views and opinions, or am I following the Buddha's teaching? Am I aligning with it? Am I just practicing out of desire? Am I practicing out of, so how do I practice Dhamma in accordance with Dhamma? And it really helps things to simplify. And again, a sense of delight is able to establish itself. So these bases of punya are to not be afraid of punya. They're another word for happiness. So I'll offer a reflection this evening. There's a bit of time for some questions. I think it's probably fruitful.
Anyone is welcome to come up here and ask a question on the subject that we've been talking about so far. Please.
I would like to read the suttas that you've cited. Is there a list? I would like to read the suttas that you cited. Is there a list you could send to me or to others?
I'd have to dig them up somehow. Most of that's in from memory.
Well, your memory is precious. we certainly wouldn't want to take that home with us.
That'd be interesting to. Maybe I could do that and at least try to remember what I. So sometimes that's also people. I go back from giving a talk and people say, well, what'd you talk about? I don't know. I can't remember. But I'll try to bring some of them to memory, send them on to Wangmo.
That would be so much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay.
Bhante, when Wamo introduced you and explained why she had asked you to talk on this topic of merit, she said she so often heard from her friends in the East that in doing something they were making merit. Mm-hmm. Could you comment on that notion of making merit?
Right. Well, yeah, I think that sense of how one conceives of the spiritual path or a spiritual life, so that a spiritual life is kind of I think in I'm most familiar with the Thai culture, but culturally in Thailand, you develop your spiritual practice, spiritual life, and it's a cumulative process of building the kind of spiritual perfections, building the kind of spiritual oomph, so that there's a critical mass of clarity and ability to recognize the truth of the Buddha's teaching. Not so much understand it, figure, but recognize it, to be able to see it clearly, so to have insight into it. So it's like it's dependent on a clarity or a purity of heart and intention that relies on all of the different kind of bases of goodness that we do, and that it doesn't dissipate, it doesn't disappear, it doesn't go anywhere. It's held somehow in the heart. It's just that's the nature of the heart, is that it acknowledges and recognizes what is it that helps that well-being and clarity. But of course, it's the opposite is true. When we're not attentive, there's things that we can be doing that create a dissonance and cloud over the heart. So one doesn't want to just get lost in the things that do cloud it over. One wants to try to keep supporting and encouraging those bases of, say, meritorious and skillful actions of body, speech, and mind that help that clarity and well-being to be solid and steady.
Bhante, thank you for hearing my question. I'm a layperson, and probably always will be, and I'm guessing, but I'm wondering, I love the teaching of the middle way, and that, we always think something has to be either this or that, and of course they're not. And I'm wondering what you might say about the opportunities that a layperson would have in terms of spiritual development. Not just like, well, since you can't be a nun or a monk, then you have to settle for this, but more, what are the active opportunities that we have unique to our situation?
Yeah, I think that's a very important reflection to be bringing up, because in any Buddhist culture, and in the time that the Buddha lived and the time when the Buddha was teaching, monastic sangha has always been a tiny minority, and many of the teachings, and Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi mentioned that last night, of so many of the teachings that the Buddha gave probably weren't kept or weren't recorded. But I think that all of those bases, say what I've spoken about tonight, are really independent of monasticism or lay life. They're the opportunities for generosity and giving, opportunities for integrity, and all through the list, and through to that aspect of straightening one's views. And in terms of the kind of the most meritorious thing that one could be doing, straightening one's views. And there's another discourse where the Buddha talks about loving kindness being kind of a extremely potent means of generating that punya basis of wholesomeness. So those are, I think it's learning, reflecting on the teachings so that they can be internalized. And that's, when we do the chanting to recollect the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha as refuge, one of the qualities that is a quality of the Dhamma is open-aiko, leading inwards, so that taking the teaching and drawing it inwards, because if one, whether one's a monastic or a lay person, if the mind and its projections are going out, or its measuring things are going out, or its expectations are externalized, he has no hope. But when we bring it into the heart, and how do we experience? How do we feel it? What's the felt sense of the experience? How do we free ourselves from the experience of suffering? And paying attention to all the nuances that arise from that, and in the ways that we can be ameliorating and relinquishing. And then the path is not about external form of monastic or layperson. It's about the human condition. Okay.
But thank you so very much for the inspiring Dhamma talk. I was really thoroughly enjoying it. I just want, if you could clarify, well, as we are here in Vajrayana temple, well, most of this, as you said, we don't know most of this iconography and all Tibetan tradition, but we of course were very inspired, and we were also full of happiness. Peace and happiness is there. But I just feel like asking if you could distinguish the difference between kusala and punya, and also saddha and bhakti.
What was the last?
Saddha and bhakti, piety, confidence
saddha
and mind.
and bhakti. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not much of a scholar, I'll try to give an answer, and if you want a real answer, you'll have to ask Bhikkhu Bodhi. The kusala is, in terms of a mental state, sort of like it's an action, so that there's bodily action, verbal action, mental action. So that's these are the when we think in terms of action, there is there's kusala. The results of actions are achieved through body, speech, and mind, and then there's so those wholesome actions that are through those different avenues of action. But I think also kusala it has a wide range of nuance, really, in the sense of it's associated with happiness and well-being. It has, say, a content of freedom or the decrease of greed, hatred, and delusion. It has a it results, it leads to sort of happiness and well-being. So it has it projects, it has a trajectory. So that maybe it has a bit broader application in terms of describing experience, and it also has in terms of emotional content, it has a sense of kusala will be steadier, and the nature of akusala is that there's always an agitation there, just by its nature. The kusala will also be, there'll be a clarity as opposed to clouded. So it has a broader perspective. Punya is a bit more specific or narrow in its scope of experience. This is an experience of happiness and well-being arising from kusala, actions that are kusala. So that punya is more of a result of kusala kamma, those wholesome actions. So that's a difference. And then, was it saddha and bhakti? So, I don't know, Venerable, do we use bhakti that much in the Pali tradition? Not familiar with it. Yeah, it's not. I think it's a term. Bhakti is, I think maybe like the expression of. In more of say like an Indian tradition, the expression of faith. Saddha is kind of faith, confidence, so that's having saddha. Saddha is sometimes it's called a spiritual faculty, sometimes it's called a spiritual power. So having the quality of faith or confidence, and usually described as faith or confidence in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And bhakti used more in an Indian context of the expression of faith in something. Okay.
I've heard bhakti used by Sri Lankan monks when giving sermons.
Oh.
They say that's Shraddha Bhakti, right?
Oh, okay. There he is. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't familiar with it from the Pali canon.
Namaskar Bhante, and thank you for giving me the class. Actually, this topic about the Punya Kiriya Vatu 10 is always have these questions. It's maybe so weird, but I really think that today is my opportunity to find the answer, because when I read these chapters, when they're talking about Tanamaya, and then Patithanamaya, Pattanimotamaya, Silamaya, Apachanyamaya, Vayavatamaya, Pavanamaya, and then Tamatesanamaya, and then Tamasavanamaya, and end with the Tito Shukama. And I always have this question in my mind when I read the chapter, and I say, why all 9 is Maya? And I leave the last one, Tito Chukama, which is really weird. Is that usually Buddha giving a teachings in a really meaningful. Like it must be some meanings that behind this set, which is all nice, a Maya, which is leave the last one, which is really interesting. I know it's translated that is set the right wheel, but which one is the 9 of them and the same set of Maya? That it just always come in my curiosities to know like what behind is, set, which is why it's set in a kind of interesting way to me. Sorry if the question is, but
it's okay.
When I read this chapter, it's always come to my mind and curious to know. And today I think it's a great opportunity to me to hear this.
Yeah, I have no idea. There's all sorts of Pali scholars in the audience.
I see in the text there was that all this says that like this the words, and then it's in the body that is in the chapters.
The whole of that whole list is from the other than Dhana Maya, Sila Maya, Bhavana Maya. Those are from the canon, but then the others are from the commentarial text, also in the Abhidhamma.
Yeah,
but yeah, I have no idea of the reason why.
It comes from the Bible. It comes contracting insurance afterlife. So you're collecting all his name and you will live after when you die. You're contracting insurance life while you're still alive, but then contracting the merit is for next life.
Oh, you mean
Yes,
the Maya?
Yes, it's come from West, not Asian tradition.
That what you mean the Maya is the result, like the fruit, and then the actions, the Chitu Chukama, is that what it is? I don't know, I'll just guess at what he just say, that was correct for the next, no?
Yeah.
Things will lead to straighten your point of view. That is the
I understand that we're just, my question is like, why the state is like that.
It looks like you're not going to get an answer tonight.
I open up if anyone. I will be delighted to hear. Thank you very much.
Nadia always has the very tough questions. In addition to making people cry, she also has the very tough questions. So anyway, thank you, Nadia. Thank you so much for this evening. And I would like to bring forward Robin Caton, who is the director of Dharma College. And she would like to say the thank you, the closing remarks. But from us, we welcome you all again to tomorrow's chanting and to say thank you so much to Ajahn Pasanno for a beautiful Dhamma talk and an offering to all of us.
I think one of the things I'd like to end with is a dedication of merit. Could we do that first?
Sure.
Okay. So that, before we really wrap up, I'd like to do a dedication of merit and dedication of blessings. Particularly, of course, the center is in honor, and the whole gathering has been in honor of Tartang Tuku, so to be able to hold those blessings in one's mind, dedicate the blessings. And I'll do a chant from our tradition. There'll be some people in the audience who know it. They can chant along, so that I'll do it in English, so that it's sort of the others can at least know what it is and set that intention in the heart. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all spiritual leaders of the earth, the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain a threefold bliss and realize the deathless. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, and through this act of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana in every kind of birth. May I have an upright mind, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble Lord. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and delusion be dispelled.
Bhante, thank you so very much for this profound talk tonight, and for the blessing and the dedication prayer that you just sang. It's so auspicious to receive that on the night of the birthday of our teacher, Tartang Tuku Rinpoche. I wish just to say thank you from all of us, especially from Dharma College. You've honored us by being here, and Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi last night, of course, as well. I do have small gifts to give you. These are books. This is a book written by Tartang Tuku. It's called Revelations of Mind, and it forms the text that we teach here at Dharma College. So if it's all right to approach you, I would like to give each one of you a copy of this book to take away with you. I know you have very heavy baskets, so this will make it just a little bit heavier for you to carry. And again, thank you again so much on behalf of everyone from the Nyingma community, from Dharma College. Thank you to all the Venerable monks last night. Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi referred to the fact that the Dharma is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good at the end. And I feel that this Tipitaka chanting ceremony has been good at the beginning and good in the middle. And I am absolutely certain it will be good in the end. And what could make us happier or more delighted than that. So thank you all so very much.
Okay, be well, everybody.